On the surface, this looks like a humble, unassuming line graph. But the thing it is actually a graph that measures human eyeballs. You may think I'm joking, but this graph determines the entire fate of every YouTuber you have ever watched. I've been thinking about this graph for many years, and it's helped me help other YouTubers make multi-million view videos multiple times. If you watch this entire video, you'll understand how this graph can make or break a video on any channel, no matter what size. Welcome to the fascinating world of retention. Before I talk about what retention is, you have to understand a little bit of YouTube history to understand why it's so important. Basically, back in the day, YouTube used to reward videos and show videos based on its clickability, also known as this click-through rate. But what tended to happen was that videos that had lots of clickbait titles and clickbait thumbnails, they got a lot of clicks, but people hated those videos because the thing that was inside the videos didn't actually satisfy what they clicked on in the first place. This is very much bad clickbait. What happened is YouTube decided, what's a way that we can measure whether people actually like the videos that they're watching? And this is how they come up with the idea of watch time. The longer that someone watches a video, then the more likely it is that they actually like that video. For example, if someone had watched something for 20 minutes, it means that someone liked that video a lot. It's not just clickbait. Watch time became this important metric. They included it in the algorithm. So for YouTube, it was important to answer one question. How do I keep people watching my videos for longer? Okay, so here's the graph that we're going to talk about, also known as a human eyeball graph, also known as a retention graph. By the way, no one calls it the human eyeball graph, but that's what it is. Basically, it measures how long people are watching your videos for. We start off at 100% because naturally 100% of people are watching your videos. Then immediately you'll get this steep drop because people immediately decide, you know what, I've seen 2 seconds or 3 seconds of this video, I'm going to click off. What tends to happen in this graph is just usually it's just gradual curve on the way down. Sometimes that curve can be very steep and it can be like this if your video is doing particularly badly, or sometimes this curve, if your video is doing really well, can be quite flat, like this. What we're trying to aim for as YouTubers is we're trying to aim for this graph to be as flat as possible. In other words, for people to stay on the video for as long as possible. However, in reality, the graph is not just going to be a straight line like this. Most of the time, it's going to be a steep drop to start off with, because there's always going to be some proportion of people that drop off. And then as people are watching the video, because this is representing, 0 seconds and it goes to, for example, 20 minutes. So as people are watching your video, gradually you can see where they are dropping off. For example, let's say there's a big dip here, and you can see where they might stay a little bit longer. So let's say it's like flat here, and then they drop off afterwards. Most graphs tend to look a little bit different depending on what sort of video that you're making. But in general, a graph is sort of downtrending like that most of the time. And so the question is, like, you might get this graph, but how do you actually interpret this graph? Well, let's start off with the very start. The hook of the video, if you're very, very charming, might be like this, but in reality, no one is that charming. So everyone has this dip at the start. Depending on how good your hook is, this dip can drastically change in terms of where it becomes flat again. This is something that I've just decided to arbitrarily call a hook point. If your video goes flat like this afterwards, then that might be a bit of a hook point here, for example. Usually this part is where the video starts to get into the meat of the content, because your starting hook, the first whatever many seconds of your video, people haven't yet decided whether they're going to watch the video or not. You don't necessarily want to delay the meat of the video too much because people will just skip ahead. What tends to happen is that if you have a bad hook or an unclear hook, then instead of having a hook point, your video just really keeps on going down and then just sort of dies very, very quickly. Your aim is to try to make this hook point happen as early as possible, but at the same time, the whole function of the hook is to try to get people to watch the rest of your video. So you don't want to necessarily deliver this too early if you have to sacrifice the quality of that hook. The hook is like an emotional promise, and it's also a promise of, hey, this video has got a lot of great things to come. Let me show you what you're in for. And then hopefully if you've convinced someone that, yeah, this video is great, then they'll be able to keep on watching. Now, officially, YouTube has described certain things, and they've put this in their education, and there's a dip and there's a spike. As an example, this is obviously very exaggerated. A dip is called so because, well, it's a dip. I mean, what else more is there to explain there? And sometimes that indicates that something very, very bad happened that section, but a lot of the time it might indicate that someone has skipped that section. This is something that's very common, for example, when you get sponsorship material. Then you might have spikes. You might see them happen and think, wow, my viewers really love this section. But sometimes it just happens because people are confused about that section and they might have to rewatch a section to be like, oh, what did that person say? Or what happened there? So you shouldn't really be using spikes, even though they might be thought of as a positive thing. But in reality, usually they're like a neutral thing. I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. If dips are only kind of mildly useful and kind of obvious, and spikes are not that useful, then what do you actually pay attention to when it comes to a retention graph? You can think of a retention graph kind of as like a person's vote in a sense. It's a vote for them to want to keep watching. What that means is that I would look at the gradients of the graph and then use those to interpret what's actually happening in the video. So what I tend to do, and this is what I tend to do with YouTubers that come to me for advice, maybe they have 100,000 subscribers, maybe they have a few million subscribers, but actually interpreting retention graphs is kind of all the same, in the sense that you really want to look at the gradients of that graph. And this is very valuable. So what a gradient is, right? Let's say that you have your graph, you have your hook point here, right? So it's sort of stabilized, and then in reality, what tends to happen is your video doesn't just kind of go in like one direct straight line like that. If it did, that would be kind of amazing. And it does happen if you've got like a video that has a few million views, but most of the time it's gonna have like bits where it does pretty well, bits where it does a little bit less well, and then maybe bits where it goes flat and then does like really well. If you zoom into this bit, right, this bit is just the start. Maybe it's like a segment that hasn't finished. Usually in a story, this corresponds to a segment that's happening and that people kind of like. What tends to happen though is that if people don't like something, then they'll tend to start dipping at some point in time. And that's this bit here. This is a very steep gradient. Steep gradients are very bad because it means that people have decided, I have no longer decided I want to watch this video. I've got other things to do. There's dishes to do. There's people that are distracting me, there's TikTok to watch, whatever it is, whatever can take their attention, they've just decided I'm going to stop watching this YouTube video. Then when your video delightfully returns to something that people actually like to watch, it will turn flat again, which is kind of like this. Flats are great. You want as many of these as possible. Sometimes you might try to draw them out by, for example, having a segment which like is a bit longer. This is a smart idea from Mario Jews, who used to be Mr. Beast's retention director. And sometimes you might want to have the story become like a little bit longer at a particular section to draw it out. Obviously, you can't just have like a really long story that doesn't go anywhere, because then you get a thing called segmentation loss where people are like, okay, this bit really sucks, and then I'm really going to dip off. But in general, you want things to be as flat as possible. Now, if you think about these sort of lines as maybe like a segment of a video, in other words, let's say like it's part of a story, maybe it's like a single challenge, maybe it's a single food hack, maybe it's a single hotel or something, whatever you're showing. Basically, what tends to happen is you almost always get some sort of segmentation loss. What is this? Well, segmentation loss is basically every single time that a certain section ends, people decide, okay, this is my time to dip out because I've finished watching this part of the video and now I actually really need to go buy some groceries. So at the end of individual segments, you tend to get just like a tiny little dip here, and then it might just flatten off by the next segment if the next segment is good. This is difficult to avoid, but not impossible. The way that you avoid this is generally use a thing called open loops, and then I'll talk about that in another video, but in summary, it's kind of like an open question or something that hasn't yet been resolved so that people keep on watching. If everything is resolved and every question has been answered, then unfortunately, people have no reason to keep on watching, right? So even though retention graphs might seem like very, very complicated graphs, but actually they're very, very simple. Really, there's only a few main shapes. There's dips, there's spikes, and then there's segment loss, and then there's like segmentation loss. And then there's flats if you're doing really well. The thing is, every single person that does YouTube has access to this graph. So the burning question that comes afterwards is that if this graph is so easy to interpret, how come every YouTuber doesn't just become instantly good at interpreting this graph and then applying it to their content and then dramatically increasing their retention? The reason is because actually there's many reasons why people might decide to drop off a video, and to you as an individual YouTuber, it may not always be obvious why. As it turns out, people's psychology is very complex because people are complex. However, very fortunately for us, there are a lot of different ways that you can actually improve this graph and a lot of ways that you can interpret what's happening in that part of the graph. I've illustrated a lot of these at the Storytelling Primer, which is available at storytellingprimer.com. It's a free 5-day course that you can take. It basically talks about things like titles and thumbnails and how to write scripts and lots of stuff that's really useful for YouTubers. It took me ages to write this thing, but I've tried to take lots of lessons from helping multiple YouTubers of hundreds of thousands of subscribers to a few million subscribers, helping them with their content, and try to pack it into this So if you like the idea of getting better at YouTube and you want to increase your views, then I would highly recommend that. The link is going to be in the description below. Again, you can get it for absolutely free. All you need to give me is your email, and then I'm going to keep it forever and keep spamming you. I'm just kidding. It's like a whole bunch of useful information, and I hope you really like it. If you've got these like steep gradients, or even if you have these dips, how do you improve them? The first is you always have to have an open loop of some kind. Open loop is this simple idea that you've got to have, for example, this question, and then it's not answered until later on. Ideally, you should have one big question for a video. In this particular case, in this video, the question is, how do I get better at YouTube by improving my retention graphs? But you've also got to have mini questions in between, because it's very, very rare for someone to be able to just wait an entire video for a payoff. People's brains just won't tolerate that long of a question unless it's like a 2-minute question or something. Then inside here, what you might have is these mini loops. So here, for example, you might have a question here and then answer here, and then same here. You might have a question here, answer here, and then likewise, you have a question here, answer here. This might be pretty abstract, so to make it more concrete, I'm just going to use this Mr. Beast video as an example. So this Mr. Beast video is a video beat Neymar, win $500,000. Just see how he sets up the opening question.
This is Neymar, and if this random subscriber can beat him in a 1v1, I'm going to give him $500,000. I also got the greatest shooter in basketball.
Okay, so there you go. That's the opening question. Is this random subscriber going to beat Neymar at football? Neymar being an incredibly talented athlete, and the random subscriber being, well, a random subscriber. But it's not enough to have that be the entire video, right? So here we're going to start up all these like mini open loops that are inherently interesting in themselves, starting with Steph Curry.
I also got the greatest shooter in basketball, the strongest hitter in baseball, and the most famous athletes on the planet.
And just more open.
Against normal people. Starting with Serena Williams, the greatest female tennis player to ever live. And she will be competing against, bring them on in, these 4 quadruplets. Hi. Oh my god.
Okay, so you can see how many open loops have been created there. If you go back to this graph and look at this again, you've got here, which is Neymar. You've got here, which is like maybe Steph Curry, then other people basically, like other athletes. And then you're starting off with Serena Williams here as another kind of scenario. And then you have to wait for the Serena Williams thing to finish. So here, Mr. Beast has opened up all these open loops that are really interesting inherently, because you're kind of interested in what's going to happen to each of these different cases. That's how you start off getting good retention. Now, of course, the open loop itself has to be an interesting question. For example, I could just ask like, oh, what's the cost of the banana down at the supermarket next door? That's not an interesting open loop. It's a question, but it's not interesting. You got to think about, okay, what's a question that's interesting enough, intriguing enough, and kind of emotionally engaging enough that people are really going to genuinely think, okay, is this something that I want to figure out or that I want to watch? And so open loops are a challenge that you're going to have to figure out and get good at. You can keep on watching this channel and I'll probably talk more about them. You can feel free to comment below. But we need to move on to the next topic because there's more we need to talk about. If open loops is one thing, something else that's very, very important for getting people to stay on your video is keeping things relevant. Now, relevance is very interesting, right? Because when you have 10,000 people, it's easy to be relevant and hyper relevant even to those people. Even if you have 100,000 people, you might have a topic that's kind of niche and appeals to those people. You can use lingo that they understand. The next thing that you have to do if you're going to try to keep people's retention is that you have to understand the broadness of your appeal. The thing is that people tend to dip off a video whenever they feel like they don't understand the video anymore. In fact, probably a lot of people might have dipped already by this point, just because I've started to get into some more advanced topics about storytelling, for example. If you're thinking about like, okay, I want to make a video that gets 100,000 or a million or a few million views, you have to always be thinking in the back of your mind, what's something that can be universally understood? What are things that are going to confuse people? And if it confuses people, before I publish a video, I probably better either explain it so that people aren't confused, or I just better get rid of it so that it's not a thing that people have to worry about. This isn't a retention graph, but let's say that you've got a graph of interest, right? People's interest can keep on increasing, but the thing is that if you have a break in people's understanding, then people's interest dramatically goes down. This is just a graphic illustration. This is not a real graph. I guess it's a weird example. If I just suddenly started talking gibberish and went babidi-boobada, then, I can only do that for like 10 seconds before people just immediately drop off the video and think, wow, this guy is weird. Maybe people think that already. I don't care. That's another issue for another video. But for you as a YouTuber, keeping clarity at all times is going to be something that's extraordinarily valuable for keeping people watching your video. There is one last aspect though that probably trumps all other aspects, because up until this point, all of these are individual tactics for trying to keep people on a video. But what if you just go to the core of why people are watching your video? Understanding at all points the emotional intent of why someone is watching your video, that is really, 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 really important. Basically, people have come onto your video for a specific reason. Maybe that reason is that they want to be entertained. Maybe that reason is that they want to be informed. Whatever it is, that reason has to be fulfilled as they're watching the video, because the moment that the reason that they started watching the video disconnects from what they're actually getting out of the video, then that's when they will dip. Now that you know all these tactics, you can understand why YouTubing is something that has a lot of depth and strategy is something that has a lot of depth. I have talked about a lot of more of the details of storytelling, for example, in my YouTube storytelling course, where I talk about retention, and not only that, but also how to make videos that people find really satisfying. I also made a course called YouTube Storytelling Beyond Retention. If you're interested in trying to figure out the exact way that people think about videos and you're really wanting to grow your YouTube channel, like this is not really for basic YouTubers. Although YouTubers who have done this course who don't have necessarily that many subscribers, they find it immensely useful. Also, people who have a lot of subscribers also find that there's a lot of incredible things from this course that they got from it. So you can feel free to check that out in the link in the description below. It helps to support this channel if you do buy the course, and obviously I'd be excited to have you there because I think it's genuinely helpful for people that want to grow their channels. And I'm quite proud of how it's turned out, just because I think it is something that, in terms of storytelling, I think it is the best course that is available on YouTube at the moment. Maybe that'll change in the future, but of course, that's just my opinion for now. And of course, I'm very biased. However, if you would like to keep learning more about YouTube for free on YouTube, feel free to click on this video, which is about the psychology of 1 million view thumbnails. If getting people to watch is one thing, then getting people to actually click on the video in the first place is perhaps the next most important thing, if not the most important thing. So feel free to check out this video below. I'm Darby, and this is Darby's YouTube Analysis. I'll catch you in the next video. Stay happy and warm, or cool, I guess if it's summer. Bye-bye.